This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Keep an eye out for the advertisement in the video. Don't worry about this. The dragon won't attack us. It's our turn. I know exactly how. But it was my turn. Oh god, why is no one stopping this? This is a question that has been asked numerous times. Turn-based combat. Is it bad?
What? Shut up! What kind of question is that?
It's a question that always crops out every once in a while, and either side tends to be furiously defending whatever they can or scrambling any sort of argument as to why this style of gameplay is great or why it's a limitation. I personally believe that turn-based combat is great, but that also stems from the fact that I've grown up with a ton of RPGs under my belt. You know the greatest hits: Final Fantasy VII, Persona 4, Pokemon, as well as a lot of lesser-known obscure titles such as MangaKamen, Rogue Galaxy, The Wizard of Oz, Beyond the Old Brick Road, Disgaea, Lunar, and many, many more. More often than not, this debate will be brought up once in a while, especially when a big YouTuber talks about it, regardless of it being a joke or not.
Is it RPGs that are dumb and lame?
No! Why don't you play them?
They just take so damn long to complete.
Why don't I like them? Okay.
Turn-based battles and too much text. I'd rather be out not having sex. Menu clutter and useless stats. And random encounters can kiss my ass.
And for a time, people will argue that it's just a joke, or that they're right, or yada yada yada. It's just as tedious as turn-based combat is made out to be. Now, I myself am not immune to this sort of debate. Hell, you're watching a video where I'm talking about this topic right now, and I'm sure as hell going to be giving you my opinions and thoughts about it. It's just that sometimes the conversation can be just as tedious and grinding up against a massive RPG boss, and sometimes you just need to understand something before you can take on that massive demon. It's just as tedious as turn-based combat is made out to be. Now, I myself am not immune to this sort of debate. Hell, you're watching a video where I'm talking about this topic right now, and I'm sure as hell going to give you my opinions and thoughts on it. It's just that sometimes the conversation can be just as tedious and grinding up against a massive RPG boss, and sometimes you just need to understand something before you can take on that massive demon. Much like how you need to have a good VPN for your computer. Yes, folks, we're talking about Surfshark VPN. After about 10,000 years, they're finally back to sponsor the channel again. So what does Surfshark actually do? Surfshark VPN keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all your information sent between your device and the internet. This keeps your personal data protected from big companies or cyber criminals. Also, a VPN swaps the real location of your device with a new one, aka changing your IP address. This way, you can virtually travel to any country around the globe. Are you traveling countries? Surfshark allows you to change your virtual location back to your home country, so that way you don't miss out on any of your favorite Netflix shows due to country block. And much like a good RPG character, you'll want to have a good defense against attacks, and Surfshark VPN provides you a safeguard against such online attacks. This VPN encrypts your online data and helps secure your personal information when you use free public Wi-Fi, which can be a goldmine for hackers. Masking your IP address is essential to becoming private online. A VPN makes sure that your city, country, and download history aren't linked to your identity. So if you're still not sure about Surfshark, allow me to give you some more loot that you can get by signing up. If you sign up with the code MANGA, you get access to the Black Friday deals, meaning you get up to 6 additional months for free at Surfshark Deals/manga. If you're still not sold on it after you get it, don't worry. Surfshark offers the 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out. All you have to do is check my description and pinned comment to find the link for your VPN. Thanks again, Surfshark VPN, for sponsoring the video. Let's get back to our turn now. Turn-based combat comes from the early days of D&D because, let's face it, that was pretty much the only way you could do that sort of high fantasy without dressing up as wizards on the weekend and tossing pseudo-lightning bolts at your friends. If for some reason you're foreign to the concept of what turn-based combat is, in which case, hi mom, thank you for watching. Turn-based combat is the gaming concept that each side in the conflict takes turns attacking each other rather than doing real-time combat when playing akin to something Devil May Cry, Mega Man, or dealing with that weirdo down the street who stole your left shoe. Over the years, there have been many complaints levied at the genre, such as it being too slow, there's too many random encounters, and hitting one button is not equated to gameplay, and several others. Now I'm gonna be straight up for once in my life and explain outright that I do see where these points are coming from. I grew up playing a lot of different games and genres. For example, I grew up with the Sega Genesis. Yes, I know, I bet on the wrong hedgehog in the console wars. I played games like Sonic the Hedgehog, Toe Jam and Earl, Comic Zone, and the surprisingly fun Disney games that were on the system before Disney decided to go to the dark side. There were RPGs on the system, sure, but they never really appealed to me. However, when we get to something like the early Super Nintendo or PlayStation, that had a lot more impressive RPGs. Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Final Fantasy, and you get the idea. Again, I bet on the wrong hedgehog. My point is, RPGs have been with us for an insanely long time, and it'd be obvious that issues with the genre of gameplay would crop up, even if they do tend to be a lot more subjective. So today I figured we'd delve into a few games that use turn-based combat and see what they do right, what they do wrong, and how we can ultimately fix the issues. I'm MangaKamen, and
oh, fuck you, Pokemon!
You all knew this franchise would come up. Pokemon! It's become a rather divisive series in the last few years. I mean, one look on Twitter will tell you that. And I've talked about the battle system in length at times on this very channel, and don't get me wrong, Pokemon has a lot of issues with their games, but to me the battle system isn't one of them. Rather, the issue stems with Game Freak's implementation of the battle system, and their reluctance to actually challenge their player base with any actual capacity, just so they can keep appealing to a super young audience. Let's break down the system. Depending on the game you're playing, you'll ultimately have hundreds of choices of Pokemon to add onto your 6-member team. Among those are smaller details such as move pools, abilities, stats, typings, held items, and many more. The Pokemon games offer a lot of customization for your team roster, and there are some insane builds that can be done out there. There are even times where there are some very odd tactics that can be used, and one look at the official tournament section of Pokemon, you can see that there are plenty of insane strategies out there. That being said, the games will often lack the same punch in them to challenge players. Take, for example, the gym leaders. Every single generation that you can actually fight gym leaders in it, they take the elemental and typing aspect of their Pokemon to the extreme. Which, hey, it isn't a bad thing since there are 18 types in Pokemon at the time of me scripting this. And even in the latest games, Scarlet and Violet, the gym leaders do use Pokemon whose types aren't initially the same as the rest of their teams. Iono has a Miss Magius, Grusha has an Altaria, and Kofu with his eyebrow. Now that's nightmare fuel. The idea isn't terrible, especially when it can be argued that some of these Pokemon choices make sense. You have an ice and fighting type crab on a team of water-based Pokemon. It makes sense to have it there thematic-wise. The problem comes when the Pokemon uses terrestrialization to become the same type as the rest of the team members. These are the last Pokemon that the gym leaders will use, so for Kofu as an example, why would you change your Pokemon out if it was using an electric or grass type moves to beat up the water types? This sucks because the whole concept of terrestrialization, while it looks so goofy with the giant hats, is a fun one. You see, Pokemon as a series is where you can normally swap out your Pokemon against your opponent. Say they use an electric type move against you, but you swapped it out to a ground type before the move happened, and that electrical move doesn't work on ground types. The same effect can apply to terrestrialization, since instead of switching out your Pokemon, you're switching its type to one where it isn't weak against or even has an immunity to. Instead of turning into a water type, Kofu could have turned his Pokemon into a fire type to switch it up. And this is the issue that I have with Pokemon's turn-based battle system. It's not the actual battle system that's the problem, it's the fact that Game Freak doesn't really utilize the capabilities of the system in and of itself. If you want another example, look towards Generation 5 and 6, where we had different kinds of battles thrown into the mix. We had triple battles, rotation battles, horde encounters, inverse battles, and many other kinds of battles that were brought into the fold. However, Game Freak kinda drops them all. Take rotation battles for example. Rotating can be done during both players and the opponent's turns and has a priority of +6, meaning it's going to happen first in the turn. Rotating is different to switching in it doesn't use up a turn. It doesn't reset status conditions like confusion and bad poison. Basically, it's a lot more of a mind game sort of battle. You can see what Pokemon your opponent has out on the field, but at any moment they could switch their Pokemon to counter yours, especially when the turn they switch they can still attack you. However, these mechanics haven't really been used since Generation 6, and that to me is an issue. Pokemon for years introduces new mechanics into the game, and at times they'll be more than likely to drop the next generation unless they're made for some arbitrary reason. Stuff like reusable TMs, which was introduced in Gen 5, have been a staple for years, or double battles still remain. But then you get to things such as G-Maxing, or Z-Moves, or Mega Evolution. They just tend to appear for a generation or two if you're lucky, and then they're gone. It seems like a bit of a waste of development time to focus on mechanics that aren't going to be carried over into the next generation. One other aspect I'd like to point out is that Pokemon gym leaders in the latest games, when you fight them, especially the early ones, they only have 1 or 2 moves. Now, I'm not saying that every team needs to have 6 Pokemon, each with their own unique strategy that only the pros could master. Rather, they should have a level curve other than just a higher level. Gym leaders going forward should have a test of strength for the players, and as such, they should be reflective of the challenge. It's not like Pokemon hasn't dipped their toes into this concept. In Sword and Shield, the last gym leader, Raihan, has this sort of thing going on. He's listed as the dragon-type gym leader, but if you look at his team, only half of them are dragons. This isn't like a situation with Lance in the first or second generation, when there were only about 4 dragons in total at that time. There are about 13 lines of dragon-type Pokemon that he could use if he wanted to in these games. Rather, his team is more focused on a game mechanic that other trainers in the game don't really utilize. He focuses on the weather, and in this case, sandstorms, which not only damages non-ground, rock, and steel type with chip damage every turn, which all of his Pokemon share a type and immunity, but also has other benefits shown on the screen. Is this the best example? No, not really, especially since he's the last gym leader of the game, and they certainly could have done something similar with a rain weather condition with Nessa, since all 3 of her Pokemon in the first battle do have the ability of Swift Swim, which if you're not familiar with, doubles the speed of the Pokemon that has that ability while it's raining in battle. And considering her Pokemon, the speed boost would have been a great thing, but at best, she only saves it for her last Pokemon. It's wasteful, and something that could have been easily used if Nessa had a simple move called Rain Dance, which sets up rain. Again, while I personally don't believe that Pokemon's battle system is bad, it's actually quite complex if you've given enough thought and such. The problem lies with Game Freak's use of it. You could have the best system in the world, but it wouldn't matter because the games don't actually take advantage of it. The good old enemy fodder and grindhouse, where you have to destroy countless enemies just to be able to get that measly amount of EXP. Out of all the complaints about RPGs, I feel like this is probably one of the strongest there is, because the XP you receive from trash mobs tends to be a bit on the low side. Are you freaking killing me? And there is just to be padding out the game that you're playing. In comparison to say stuff like Gravity Circuit and Gunvolt, the combat is snappy and the mooks you fight don't come within the thousands, and you can play to the game's strengths since you're doing for more of a reactive-based system of gameplay. Turn-based combat, however, is more of a number game, and as such, you need to get more and more numbers to be good. Let's be honest, when you get to a certain level in a game, fighting against enemies isn't really going to be all that fun, especially when the battles can be random and not really help out. If you're a character who's at level 50, battling a level 2 rat in a sewer isn't exactly what heroes are meant to do. So how do we fix this sort of thing? Well, there are a number of games that do unique things with mechanics like this, Mother 3 being a prime example, or Earthbound for us in the West. If you dash into enemies that are well below your current level, well, you just kill them. Or in Persona 5, where you can get the instant kill, which can be used to kill low-level enemies whenever you get the jump on them. However, the mechanic was improved vastly in the Royal version. Insta-kill now gets players some of the EXP that they would have gained through a battle, a chance to get items, and a new persona. If the players already have the persona that insta-kill drops equipped, it converts the new one into experience for the old one. Insta-kill, rather than activating out of every stealth attack on lower level enemies, is now triggered by sprinting through the enemy instead. In addition to that, enemies can be insta-killed or highlighted in a new green outline when using the third eye ability in the game. This made it a lot easier for players who don't want to use the function to target them, and players who think insta-kill rewards them for doing too little have the option to simply not use it. Like I said, the best part is, it's optional. There are ways to be able to do the grind in a lot better ways as well. Let's look to a game like Baldur's Gate 3, and yes, we'll be coming back to this gem later in this video. Baldur's Gate 3 is probably going to be one of the best games of the year if I'm honest, and for good reason. No, not because you can do it with a bear, you perverted journalists. It's because of its story and its gameplay. To be frank, while the story isn't bad, it's not really my cup of tea, since if I wanted to play D&D, I'd play D&D. Offers a lot more freedom. But Baldur's Gate 3 still offers a lot of freedom to the player regardless, and part of that comes down to how it distributes its EXP. You see, it takes a page out of D&D's playbook, quite literally, and offers different ways to gain XP. You can obviously get XP from killing limited amount of monsters and people in the game, you murder hobo, but there are other options as well, such as completing quests or even exploring Faerun, and sometimes this is a must because enemies don't respawn. You can also learn XP by talking yourself out of situations too. The game offers different means of progression and leveling up, and grinding isn't really a thing in the game. Now, if you want to take a more brutal route, you could go with Least the Painful, where most of the encounters are just boss fights, and you have to actively seek out the bosses so you can get the XP. It not only makes each boss battle a lot more impactful, but it doesn't actually feel like grinding since you're going after bosses and making headway. I want to point out that all these things I brought up, the issue of random encounters encounters may seem to be that you should remove them all entirely, which in all honesty kind of misses the point of this section. Hell, even a game like Pokemon has now gotten rid of random encounters since they allowed the Pokemon to appear in the overworld. You have a choice if you want to battle some Pokemon. And before this, they had other effects such as repels or having a Pokemon with Intimidate in the front of your party back in the days, so you could just encounter wild Pokemon in tall grass and caves, and just ignore them. Damn Zubats!
Rats? That's unfortunate. What? Because I'm Batman!
This is some of the nicest grass I've ever seen in my life.
One of the major staples of RPG and turn-based combat that I don't really see talked about is the battlefield in and of itself. Even back in the days of the olden times when the battles start, we would be taken to a different area that had elements of the surrounding area, but it would often just be used as a bit of imagery if you were lucky. Granted, games like the original Pokemon, Mother, several Final Fantasy games, plenty of games like that back in the day would transport you to a nebulous location in order to fight. To me, there's nothing wrong with this, but here's the thing. With the exception of the weather conditions in Pokemon, most RPGs don't exactly capitalize on the battlefield in and of itself. Sure, you'll have the games like the Tales series, which have the arena of sorts, and you can move your characters around in order to dodge attacks, but again, it's not really utilizing the battlefield at best it can. It's here when you get to something like Baldur's Gate 3. Again, this game takes a lot of pages out of the player's handbook of D&D, in which case, whenever you do go into battle, you start wherever the battle activates. And there are times that you can use the environment to your advantage or disadvantage, like, say, kicking people off ledges and setting them falling to their deaths by throwing them.
You got me tripping, stumbling, flipping, fumbling.
And that's not it. Depending on the location, you can pick up items to throw at enemies. You can use the environment to your advantage. There are hazardous locations that can get you or your opponents. You can use spell effects or attributed arrows to affect the battlefield. There's also AoE attacks that take in consideration as well. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 is an amazing game, one where you can change your classes, do a lot of customization. Hell, even the placement of enemies in your party is something you need to consider when it comes to moving around the battlefield, since they can take attacks of opportunity if you get too close to in your movement when passing them. It's also something that's done in Yakuza Like a Dragon, and while that game has its own section after this, I do want to bring it up here to show that there are other games that do have that element in them. However, Baldur's Gate 3 is probably the more shiny examples of turn-based combat in recent years. The customization, the ability to choose how to fight, the fact you can be a righteous hero or a murder hobo, this game has a lot of options to it. Bit of a tangent, but if there's one thing I could say against it, and it's something that I will fully admit is a me thing, I would love to see different games and genres of RPGs take on this style of turn-based RPG. As someone who has played a lot of D&D and has kind of gotten tired of the sword and sorcery aspect, I would love to see different genres take on this system. I know it'd probably be a mountain of work, and I understand that not every RPG can replicate the level of polish that Baldur's Gate 3 has to offer, but just imagine if we had a more modern-day equivalent RPG like this one, or a sci-fi version. Now watch as someone in the comments types that there is one, and hey, if there is, let me know. I'd love to get my hands on something like that and play it.
Time to tip the scale.
He said it! He said it!
RPGs and turn-based combat often, more than not, come down to numbers games. And while I do see how that can take some of the challenge out, since if you have a bigger number going on, it's not all exciting when you're lording it over people. Theoretically, if you were to play Pokemon Omega Ruby and just grind against wild Zigzagoons for hours or even weeks in the first area, you could get yourself a powerhouse of a Pokemon. Of course, that'd just be masochistic, and I'm sure someone on Twitch or YouTube has done that. The problem lies with the challenges that games present as well as how to balance the encounters. I did bring up stuff like the level and XP systems, but I want to talk about elements such as level scaling. If you're not aware of what level scaling is, it's essentially the anti-grinding idea, where enemies and games would be scaled up to your level so a consistent challenge could be present. This is accomplished by either strengthening an enemy's stats or equipment, having more enemies on the field, or outright replacing them with stronger versions. Probably one of the more famous examples of scaling would be Final Fantasy VIII. It's the only dedicated scaling system that the series has to offer. Essentially, the game matched a monster's level to your party's general level, with the monsters automatically learning new and more dangerous techniques. The monsters would often be scaled up to your party's average. And here's the thing, FF8 offered a different sort of reward other than just challenge. Monsters that leveled up with you would have their loot drops be approved upon. Essentially, the higher the level, the better the loot. Heck, Final Fantasy VIII has another system called the Draw and Junction system where you could harvest magic spells from monsters, and the higher their level, the stronger their magic. So while the challenge of the system is there, guess what? You don't really even need to invest in it. FF8 had another system embedded into it, the Junction system, which ultimately allowed you to have a ridiculously strong party without actually leveling up. Essentially, and this is me going really simple with the system, when you have magic and you have a Guardian Force equipped to a character, the Guardian Force will allow you to equip magic to certain stats. This is the Junction system. They essentially allow you to equip magic onto your character's stats. For example, if you have a GF equipped that has the ability to power up your strength, you can junction your magic to that character's strength and it would improve upon it. And the stronger the magic spell, the stronger boost you can get to your stats if you equipped it. To point out, all the bosses and mini-bosses in Final Fantasy VIII never award XP, just AP, which is used to strengthen abilities. Funnily enough, doing this actually makes the game a lot easier. The downside is that you have to put a lot of time and effort into learning the system, and how to exploit it as well. Oh well. Other RPGs that have scaling systems are like Octopath Traveler. They tie the enemy and boss encounters to your recruitment of other characters and completed story missions. In addition, each area also has a maximum level where enemies can stop getting more powerful. Other games offer different solutions, like going back to the Final Fantasy series, 10 offered a change on how to strengthen your characters with the sphere grid, and how you could essentially, if you had no life of your own, get abilities that other characters had and max out everyone's stat. It's a change from the level system that many other games have and relies mostly on the stats on both the players, party, and the monsters they face. I suppose the question should be asked if a level system should be even in place for some games. After all, stats are what's key, and if you have the ability to essentially choose your stats, what's the point? If you look towards something like Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, when you level up, you can choose to improve your HP, FP, or BP for each level, and allow the badge system to give you additional perks. That's a less traditional level up system that focuses more on improving your resource stats than your attacking and defending stats. You can even min-max in the game. I know we're getting a little off topic with the turn-based combat, but behind the scenes aspects are necessary to discuss since they are what makes the games work.
Here's a present for you.
Another big issue that turn-based combat has is the amount of time that the gameplay takes. This can be tied into the grind section, but more or less, let's talk about the actual battles. One of the biggest complaints is that the games take too much time. This is due to animations, selecting your moves, and the aforementioned issues that encounter rates are. Granted, this is probably one of the more subjective points in this video. Some people often see this as more of a relaxing aspect of gaming, where you can just sit back, enjoy the music, and beat up some monsters. Plus, considering games like Yakuza Like a Dragon with its insane moveset, there is a level of entertainment to be had watching the odd moves being used here. I can recall back in the days of Final Fantasy VII, the original, not the remake, when people would be in awe of Knights of the Round. Seeing all the fancy animation played with the graphics back in the day was amazing. And considering all the effort it would take to get the summoning all the way back then, it was a reward for people to have. And getting back to Yakuza Like a Dragon, when you do the money-making business minigame and you unlock the satellite orbital laser, well, that's one way to take care of the homelessness crisis. It's fun to unlock new animations and abilities. It's just entertaining. One can argue that these additions will make the combat take longer, and I'd counter that you can skip them in a good number of games. Heck, even Pokemon has the ability to turn off animations in the menu. I mean, so long as we don't have to go back to the dreaded slow days of Generation 4, that'd be the real nightmare. Of course, there are other means of keeping the player's attention other than fancy graphics. I mean, we are playing a game, of course, so why not have some inputs here? Yakuza Like a Dragon, see, I told you I'd be coming back to it a lot. There are multiple times where you have to do quick time events in combat in order to get some additional effects or damage. Unlike, say, other games that have QTEs during cutscenes, your focus is already on the game in front of you, so you don't have to worry about your attention being drawn away from the animations or possible story beats. And you don't have to worry about losing your life during it. There are several other ways on how to supplement this, and that's to have more into the combat system that can really engage your players. One example I want to bring to attention is one I'm not sure a lot of people have heard of, and it's from MangaKamen. It's a game from the PS2 era that I would love to cover sometime, but for now, let's focus on the fact that how the game changes things up is that it has a turn order. Displayed at the top when you're battling is a turn order set in the style of cards. Now, while I love the design of that, you're probably thinking that this is just odd. Why would we care about this? A lot of games have turn orders. Here's the thing, my friends. In MangaKamen, your character's actions determine where they land on the turn order after they make that move in the game. And there are also skills that can affect the turn order. One such ability is to have the attacks be set up in the future, turning some of those cards into attacks. Some abilities can also allow you to mess with the turn order, knocking back your opponent's turn so you can get an additional turn going forward. Or you can even clear some of the enemy's cards on this turn order as well. Now, I'm only bringing this up as the possibility of there being more interesting mechanics to bring to the table so people can be entertained. The more you can entice your players with these sorts of mechanics and changing up the formula, the better chance your players would be able to be sucked into the system in and of itself. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect formula, and I'm sure someone out there is willing to point out that these additional mechanics will add to the tedious nature of RPGs. And that's fine. After all, a lot of this is going to be dependent on the person. Of course, there's one more element that needs to be addressed in regards to the turn-based combat. Here's the thing about video games, especially the ones with turn-based combat. They aren't just their battle system. Sure, combat is a big part of the games, don't get me wrong, but there are several parts to a game. Characters, stories, style, music, and tons of other elements can draw people into games, and allow them to really dive into the aspects of the turn-based systems. The Persona series, especially 3 through 5, are a great example of that since it also includes the social RPG elements that are in the other half of the game. Spending time with your friends, training, working at a job, doing schoolwork. While those sound mundane, they add to it, and they give benefits to the combat by providing abilities with your confidants and getting a bit stronger personas when you perform the fusion technique. Not to mention, it gives you a nice reprieve from the combat. Of course, some games also rely on their narrative. There's a reason why so many people found Final Fantasy VII to be a masterpiece for many years after it came out. To make it clear, I don't think it's a masterpiece, I think it's a good game, maybe even great, but since people don't like to actually listen before they comment, I had to be clear on this. Don't get me wrong, you need to have a good balance of materials to make a good game. Undertale, for example, while it has a fun bullet hell type of battle system, it's more known for its music and story thematics. Still a fun battle system though, but there needs to be a complementary combination between the battle system and the story so that way you can push yourself through the countless battles. Oh, and flowers that turn to demons.
You clam up!
At the end of the day, turn-based battle systems can be fun, but much like how some people can find fighting and rhythm games to be entertaining, others don't see the appeal, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like turn-based combat, and I know there are others who don't and don't want to give it an actual chance. And again, that's perfectly fine. Everyone's different, and while we may have some common ground, there's no guarantee that everyone's going to like everything about a gaming mechanic. Turn-based combat has a lot of issues that even I can admit, and you can chalk it up to personal taste like I did with Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know, I think because I grew up with a lot of RPGs in my more formative years after I stopped with the Sega Genesis and got my hands on a PS2, I'm biased. I didn't have a choice, since my Sega Genesis broke and my mom gave away all my games at the time. I still think that turn-based combat has a place in the gaming world, and considering that we're still having this conversation in 2023 of all times, and we're still having games that have turn-based combat, it's no surprise that it's going to be here for a long time.
You're fucked.
In any case, I'm MangaKamen. Thanks for the watch. Please consider dropping a like and a comment down below to help the channel out, and please consider supporting the channel via the links down below. I want to thank Surfshark VPN once more for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to check out my link to their services in the description below. Peace out!